Hello there, many thanks for still staying with us on Business Nigeria today. Now it's time to bring you the second half of our interview segment as we focus on the real estate and construction sector here in Nigeria. Now, over the past couple of months, inflation has been a big buzzword in global economies as well as it continues to rise, underpinned by factors ranging from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic to the current Russia-Ukraine crisis, which has led to a surge in fuel prices and other costs of everyday commodities. Now, despite Nigeria's economic growth prospects, the real estate and construction industry remains low due to inflation, which results in increased cost of construction, the overdependence on imported building materials, and much more. Now, additionally, these developments have recorded an increase in the housing deficit in Nigeria, which is likened to the cost of building materials due to supply chain disruptions and inflation as a whole. Well, to discuss this and more, I have live here in our Lagos studio to assess the growing housing deficit and the impact of inflation on the second half year outlook for the real estate and construction industry here in Nigeria. I'm now being joined by founder and chief executive officer of Bay Project, Segun Adegoke. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today, Segun.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's start off really with one of the biggest hits we have the real estate and construction sector facing. That's the big word, inflation. We've seen astronomical increases, at least 300% increase in terms of the pricing of items. Talk about steel, roads, talk about tiles and other elements within the construction base now. With this playing out just within the first quarter of this year, it got worse by the second quarter. So the first half year of 2022 was difficult for players like yourself. Let's talk about how much of a hit inflation is having on the sector.
Thank you very much once again. Basically, inflation has been a serious menace in this particular sector. If outside of real estate, it's been a very major challenge in every other sectors as well. But basically, narrowing down to real estate, basically, Nigeria over the last years has been actually faced with continuous rise in housing deficit. Nevertheless, it's not similar. It's going to actually ease off anytime soon. Statistics shows that inflation has eaten deep into most of these construction materials over the last 6 months for over 200-300%. I could still recollect that we had reinforcements sold last year, December, for a bit above 300,000, but as I speak to you today, is over 530,000 naira. So if you look at the numbers, that's almost 100% increase already. So to soil, sand, sharp sand that we have in Ogun State.
Iron rods, steel, roofing sheets.
Same thing to granite. So, and basically, private investors actually are in for the money. Basically, everybody's into the business, for the profit, obviously. So when you put in something, when there's an input, basically, you expect a corresponding output. So that's why I think basically housing deficit is a problem because of all of these issues that we're talking about, inflation. Affordability ratio is another thing. Some of these houses are constructed, but what is the average per capita income of a Nigerian? What's the monthly salary expected to be paid by the government to a Nigerian? I think the minimum wage is 30,000. The average per capita income is about $2,000 per year. That takes us to about 50,000 naira per month, thereabout. So if you look at these indexes, you see that it's going to be a serious issue moving forward. Another thing is that if you look at most of these construction materials, they are being imported, leaving out cement, though we even still locally produce
even with the local production of cement, it's quite high because it went from about 2,500 now to over 4,000
now. Yeah, and it's across boards, Boa, Dangote, and all of this.
Okay, now, Adegoke, before we delve into the intricacies playing out, let's also look at how much of a leap we've had in terms of the surge of houses. Now, you take, for example, one-bedroom apartments, say in an off-plan site, as of last year or in the year 2020, which went for about 18 million naira, now has tripled to well over 40 million naira thereabout. How then do we begin to have much more affordable housing going by this current trends? Because at the end of the day, like you've also made mention of, real estate players who are here having their investable funds here still need to cash out. But it's a heavy blow for the average Nigerian who wants to own a home.
I mentioned the other time the affordability ratio. That's the problem. Like I said, the analysis is still clear. It's there. So when the private sector is doing a lot, and I think the government also needs to contribute greatly to this, because the first thing is the Land Use Act is that the government owns all the land. So we should start from the foundation, which is the land. That's the first thing. You need to acquire your land before you can build. That's when you're done building, that's when you place a price on it, right? So if you look at these numbers, starting from the land, I think government has a huge role to play in the structure of the land, how the land is being structured here and there. So, and also if you look at what the prices across board from one bedroom, like you mentioned, in the last couple months, we had about 20, 30 million there. But now, a one bedroom.
And even before the year ends, it's going to still increase much more.
Definitely. So these things are things that we can't really cope unless we go to the foundation, which is basically the land. Some people can actually afford a mansion in probably places like Ibadan. But before, that money is just well spent on just land in Lagos, right? So another thing is some people actually, just acquire landed property as a means of wealth retention, which is very bad. You look at CBD areas, central business districts, you see people, empty houses, empty lands that are there, and people have to stay outskirts because,
there's not that liquid fund to
basically. So it's really a problem. I think it starts from the place, from the point where we have to start looking at this is the place of government. Government has a huge responsibility to play. The control agencies, the LABCA, fiscal planning, basically, the entirety of government have to do something to the Land Use Act, the prices placed on those lands. If you look at it, sometimes in this Lagos, you realize that what you need to actually even build, to buy the land is equivalent to what you need to even build on it, even as much as we are talking about inflation. So I think the problem starts with us before we even go to the imported materials and all of that.
How flawed would you also say is the figures we are currently working with in terms of housing deficits? Because you hear of fantastic elements on paper and how much government is putting an effort towards affordable housing. You look at private players like yourself also saying they're building 100,000 homes and all of those. But at the end of the day, it seems like a drop in the mighty ocean. There's some level of dark aura around these figures. We are not working with concrete data or data that reflects the reality of the times. We have 17 million, we have 22 million. What is the figure here?
Million. So the problem is it starts with, like I said, back to the trust of people in government data. Is that data to start with? That's the question. So sometimes we hear 60 million, like you said, 17 million. Research sometimes shows as much as 60 million units of housing needed to take care of this deficit. So I think the government, like I said, I'm still repeating that, I feel the government has, though private investors also, I think there should be a friendly relationship between the government because, the data is with the people. It's from the people to the government, sorry. So, we should make things also easy for the government to access data, basically. But if you look at it, the numbers actually does not tell it. People sleep under the road, bridges every day. We drive through Lagos, we see people, just find a way to just with their head. And I think government needs to do more in terms of housing units, building housing units. You realize that when they build houses everywhere, it's only streamlined to people that work in the government. I guess, they have, if you look at the mortgage scheme too, I think they have about 50 million as the maximum they can give. What would the 50 million have?
It's cancelling to build a one bedroom.
That's it, one bedroom.
Areas.
So for someone that has worked, even in the government that we're talking about, the restriction is not really supposed to be with just, what about that person that works as an entrepreneur? What about that person that works with a private organization? People work in banks, they work with oil and gas. The tech guys are really doing very well now. So how do you cater for all of this population?
That's where we have players like yourself, but at the end of the day, that price
come back to affordability ratio. Then is it really affordable because the land is back to the government again? The land, so most of the land, they say, is owned by the government. So when you have to, for example, let's do a practical analysis here. When you have to buy a 300 square meter for 40 million naira, you have to build on it for another 40 million naira. You're already at 80 million.
And then before you put that on the market, it would go for 120, 150 million naira
over a 1 year period of time. So it's basically, like I said, though the private investors have a role to play, but if you look at it, there has been a continuous rise in private investment in real estate. If you look at it, people have been able to identify, how lucrative real estate is. Today, you hear one real estate development company,
The boom really surprises me, though, because we have so many real estate firms coming now on board and also promising cheap acquisition of, not cheap, but relatively affordable housing plans or land acquisition. Irrespective of all of these challenges, what's fueling this boom that we have in the market?
Yeah, well, so the thing is still, if you look at, like, back to what I said, affordability ratio. Let's come back to the per capita income, how much we make. If you look at those people, the target audience are basically diaspora. Statistics shows that the highest, about 70 to 80% of people that acquire properties in Lagos today are diaspora.
So would you say that's what informs this calculation of 12 to 24-month period? So they just send those funds to family members and others?
They can easily send it down here and all of that. So, but basically, I think, like I've said, I think if lands are available and affordable from the source, which is from the government, if there are regulations, because before we go to materials to even build, we have to talk about the land.
Yes.
That's where it starts. You can't acquire, you can't build in the air.
Let's deal with another contentious issue we have here in the country now. At the end of the day, when we have private players come on board and invest in their funds here, one of the elements we have to deal with is the quality of housing that we have now. We've heard stories about building collapses. We heard that made the news, one of the biggest within this year. Yes, within this year, we had Fosco homes also collapse. These were structures that had millions and millions of the elite in Nigeria investing their funds in, and quality was one of the missing elements there. How important is it that we need to get this right check, especially for the fact that we still deal heavily on imports? The control of that space is out of our hands.
Okay, so I think other countries of the world also import, but I think what is very essential is for people to understand that they are building for people safety of lives and property. So when you have that in mind, that people like you and me are coming into this place to live, to secure their lives and property, you have to stay fair. Then coming practically, I think, like I said, there should be a friendly relationship from the control agency. I mean, the building control agency, like Lagos State Building Control Agency, the physical planning unit, the material testing unit, and also private investors. So there are actually protocols to all of these things. There are actually bureaucratic process to building the house in Nigeria. So it start from the design. Before you even go to design, you start from the soil test, right? So when you know the soil test, you know the soil bearing capacity, you know what is expected on that particular type of soil, right? You know the type of foundation you can actually erect, right? So I feel, and we have the technical know-how. We have people that are doing very fine, the engineers, the architects, beautiful ones out there. They're actually doing really well. But I think, like I said, we should just bear in mind, both of us, private sector and the control agency, which is basically the government, we should bear in mind that we're actually building for lifestyle properties. We're actually securing people's lives, basically. And it could be us, it could be our family, it's anybody that's going to purchase in that property. So because when you have to design, for example, I want to mention instances, but I mean, if you have a design that's to carry, say, for example, 3 floors, and you actually, there's what they call factor of safety. So a factor of safety is an average of 1.5 drawbacks. So when you have to now overload that type of foundation, natural occurrence happens, but it's not very common because that will have been taken care of in the design process. Do you understand? So I feel like it's just a thing that we have to do ourselves in private sector and also the government. The government should also ensure at every point in time the submitted designs at all time is what is being built, and also on the private sector they should adhere, and they should basically cooperate with.
That's the element of regulatory oversight playing out there. Now we have terms like the new Lagos and the new Ogun State and the new across different states, just a new outlook. But still coming back here to Lagos where we are right now, you see the uplift and the facelift that we have for the new Lagos, but we also have to face the reality of drainages. Why do we still have plannings that are faltered when it comes to the drainage lines? And also, we are yet to embrace or open up the conversation of real estate development here in the country, which acknowledges underground spaces. That seems like a novelty. You go to the likes of Asia, Europe, and then you see fantastic edifices that also have underground spaces. But we can't have that here because it's also flawed by drainage systems.
So I think proper planning is very important. When you have, if you want to build one unit of building, you have to plan. If you want to build a city, you have to plan. If you want to build a community, it's all about planning, because there are actually infrastructural elements that could be put in place to ensure that all these things are well taken care of. For example, if you are to build, it is expected that you have your compound level way above the road level. Are these things considered when you are building? It is expected that your floor level inside the house will be higher at some rate above the compound level. Then when you channel the water in an estate, for example, or a community to the public drainage system out there, so where is it going? These are the questions. When the developers, so to say, or the private investors in the industry are doing their responsibility to ensure that the drainage system are well laid out and all of that, then the central system, which is the public drainage system, which is back to the government again. So what is being done? Is the volume sufficient to take the influx of water that's coming from the neighborhoods to maybe the canals or the lagoons or wherever? So I think it's about planning. I think we need to, the central sewage system needs to be looked into properly and see how these wastewater have been, channeled.
Second, we are wrapping up this conversation. I'd like you to just speak in about 2 minutes. Now, what's your expectation for players like yourself, the investment base that we should look out for the second half of the year, and how much of a boom should we further expect from the real estate sector?
Well, private investors have actually done greatly well in the last years. Like I said, we've been able to identify home and abroad that real estate is one secured and very profitable business. So they are doing a lot. I think what is just important for us to do, like I said earlier, is to have in mind that we are building for people, the life of the people. Safety is of essence. Structural integrity is very important. So amidst all inflation, land use act, and all of that, when we are building, we should build to standard all the time.
Thank you so much for your time on the show today, Segun Adegoke. And then we also have to realize that at the end of the day, we have issues around insecurity. Real estate firms are also looking towards that and how they secure their communities. And we can only wish you the very best with your project as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you once again. Well, we'll take a quick break.